I paid for my sister's entire wedding. Then she uninvited me via text. The text came while I was hauling lumber off my truck, a 7-word guillotine that dropped without ceremony. Per mom, please don't come tomorrow. Hey, I stood in the driveway with a 2x4 on my shoulder and my spine turned to ice. I read it twice, then 3 times, like the words might rearrange into something sane if I stared long enough. Tomorrow was the rehearsal dinner. 2 weeks from now, the wedding I had promised my kid sister since we were both eating cereal for dinner and pretending milk on a dusty porch counted as celebration. Tomorrow I was supposed to sign the last vendor checks. Instead, I tasted copper. I called. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. Finally I typed, "Is this you or mom?" The bubbles came, vanished, came back. Please don't make this harder. The driveway looked like a crime scene, sawdust glittering like ash, a half-built pergola in my neighbor's yard, the sun dropping toward rooftops. I went inside, grabbed the white binder labeled wedding, a fat thing with tabs for catering, flowers, photography, deposits, and drove. The venue was one of those renovated mills. Brick, string lights, a floor that groaned like an old man. The coordinator recognized me and stiffened. "Jack, we got a message from your mother." "Did you get a message from the person paying?" I asked. She flinched. I just follow the contact." The contact was my mother. Of course it was. Lorna never met a room she didn't want to direct, a narrative she didn't want to re-edit. She'd turned grief into choreography after Dad died, and we learned to hit our marks or get elbowed off stage. She said I was too intense for a wedding. She said my face made people think of courtrooms and overdue bills. She didn't say I raised Ava while she learned to be glamorous with a man who taught her new ways to win. She didn't say I kept the lights on. I asked for the invoices and sat in a corner flipping pages. The florist number was $2,000 higher than our last conversation. The photographer had been swapped for a preferred partner, twice as expensive. The catering contract had a clause, payments routed through a management company, RLC Events, which, for anyone else, would be a random acronym. For me, it was a punchline. RLC were my stepfather Roy's initials. He did drywall and favors, mostly for men who hosted fundraisers. He was all smiles and calls you buddy, while he steals your gas can and returns it empty. I took pictures of everything. I highlighted the clause. I asked the coordinator to note any changes on my copy, and she smiled like a hostage and did as told. Then I left the binder on the desk and carried my anger back to the truck like it weighed the same as lumber. On the drive home, I called Ava again. Nothing. I called our brother Nate. He picked up on the second ring with his cop voice. "Jack, don't escalate. Tell Mom to send that text from her own number next time." He hesitated. "Ava doesn't want drama. She wants a wedding she can breathe in. I'm the one who gave her that." "Be bigger," he said, and hung up like virtue made him heavy. At home, I went to the top shelf of my closet, to the cigar box I hadn't opened in years, and lifted out the thing I only ever touched when I needed to remember who my promises were for. A yellowed envelope with my father's handwriting. "For Ava's wedding day. Give to her, from me." Tom had written it a month before he died. He knew things about timing. He knew how grief turned the air inside your chest into glass. I'd kept the envelope for a decade, expecting it to feel like a relic. That night it felt like a fuse. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the flap, my thumb on the seal. The question wasn't whether to open it. The question was whether opening it now counted as betrayal or rescue. My phone buzzed. A new text from an unknown number. "Meet me at Aunt June's porch. 10 minutes. The address was ours when we were little, a warped porch, a swing that didn't swing so much as complain. I knew who it was before I drove. Ava. She was in a hoodie with her hair in a knot. No makeup, the face she wore when she used to steal my fries and run. She looked smaller. "I'm sorry," she said before I spoke. "I told her not to text you. I'm the one writing the checks," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I know." She twisted the drawstring into a tight rope. "She thinks it'll be easier if you don't come." "Easier for who?" "For everyone," she whispered, and I saw a bruise of something that wasn't physical, a compromise pressed into the soft parts of her days. "Jack," she said, "you'll make a scene." "I'll make a toast," I said. "To Dad." I touched my pocket where the envelope felt like a heartbeat. "He left you something." Ava's eyes filled fast. Don't what? Don't put him in this. Please." "Then tell me the truth." Is this you or her? She looked toward the dark street where a car idled. Headlights off. The outline of Roy's pickup, a cigarette ember floating like an eye. She says Roy should walk me down, Ava said. She says it looks better. I laughed, quiet and mean, because the alternative was choking. Better for who? For the city, she said, and that was when the fuse hit something dry. Ethan's office is up for a big contract. Roy says. Say it. Roy says if you and he aren't in the same room, it won't spook the board. Spook the board. I repeated and tasted the words. So you uninvite your brother to make your husband's boss feel safe. She flinched. I'm trying to get through my wedding day alive. You're trying to survive a choice somebody else already made for you. I pulled the envelope and held it up. Dad made one too. She backed away like paper could bite. Not tonight. Roy's engine coughed. The ember died. Ava wiped her face with her sleeve and whispered, I love you. Like a confession, and ran to the truck. I stood on the porch and watched my breath ghost in the streetlight. Then I slid my thumb under the flap and opened the letter that had waited 10 years to be a grenade. Son. That's how it started. Not Jack. Not Buddy. Just the word he wore like a handshake. Halfway down page 1 my chest was all splinters. I read slowly, lips moving like I could taste the vowels he left behind. He told me to be gentle with myself because I'd be the one who carried the tools. He said he worried that grief would make me great at fixing broken things and terrible at letting anything be easy. He told me to give Ava the envelope when she looked happiest, even if happiness takes a shape I don't like, because love wasn't governance, it was witness. Then there was a second page tucked behind the first. It wasn't a letter. It was a key, taped to cardstock with Dad's clean block letters under it. Box 314, Riverside Credit Union. For the things I couldn't say out loud. I stared at the key until it stopped being a symbol and became a piece of metal I could use. The clock said 10:12. The credit union would be closed. Roy's truck had disappeared from the end of the street. My hands shook in a way I hadn't felt since the night I signed for our first mortgage. I tried sleep. It kept its distance. At 8:55 the next morning, I was at the credit union door with coffee that tasted like burnt apologies. The woman at the desk looked at my ID, then at the sticky note Dad had left in their file. He'd thought of everything, even this, and escorted me to a small room with a table and a box that clanked when it landed. Inside, a black ledger bound in tape, a flash drive, a photograph of Mom and Roy at a Christmas party I didn't attend, and a folded receipt from a hospital bill with a corner ripped off. The ledger had Dad's handwriting for the first dozen pages. Dates, vendors, payments, names I recognized from our towns, who owes who ecosystem. Then the handwriting changed, stiff and careful. Mom's. Starting 6 months after Dad died, the household expenses doubled and then bled into Roy's business accounts. There were deposits marked insurance remainder that hopped from one account to another until they vanished into RLC events. There were payments to a floral company that didn't exist, then payments from that floral company to a P.O. box that did. Roy's. My throat felt raw. I plugged the flash drive into the credit union's ancient computer. A folder popped up, for Jay. Inside, scanned invoices, emails between Roy and a city procurement address, Ethan's department, discussing discretionary vendor approvals and expedited processing in advance of council vote. In one thread, a note from my mother. Please keep our family out of any publicity. We can't afford any more scrutiny. I printed everything under the desk clerk's raised eyebrow. I put the binders and paper back in the box, then tucked the key in my wallet like a curse and a blessing. I texted Ava, coffee. She didn't respond. I texted Ethan, we need to talk. Without your entourage. He responded like a man who thinks he's a chessboard. Lunch at Whitman's. 1 p.m. Don't be late. Whitman's was where city men pretended to be casual in jackets that cost a month of rent. Ethan was already there, tie loosened, a napkin folded like a flag. Brother, he said with false warmth. You look tired. I read, I said, and slid a printout across the table. He glanced, then smiled like I'd handed him a weather report. Jack, you're a contractor. You know how the sausage gets made. I know when meat is rotten, I said. He cut into his salad like anger had calories. You think you can walk in here with screenshots and blow up a wedding? A contract? He leaned forward. Morna said you might try something noble. Listen to me. Ava needs simple. She needs a day without your ghosts. Roy's company is laundering through her centerpieces. Thanks to that, we can pay for a starter home, he said softly, and for a second I saw the boy he must have been. Clever, scared, eyes always down the road. I love her. I'm building us a life. Don't take that from her because you don't like the scaffolding. The scaffolding collapses when someone breathes on it, I said. I brought a breeze. He laughed, more air than sound. What do you want, Jack? I want my sister to know what her marriage sits on, I said. And I want my father's letter to land where it should. Ethan sat back. Then you should also know what your name sits on. He let that hang there, ugly and smug. Ask your mother. I left the restaurant with my jaw clenched hard enough to hurt. On the sidewalk, I called a number I hadn't dialed since I hung up my foreman's hat to chase municipal contracts. Compliance. I told the woman on the line I had documents. She told me to email and to expect a call back within a week. A week's too late, I said. Then send it anyway, she said, tired, like truth was paperwork. I sent it. I blind copied myself. Then I drove to the venue to see the rehearsal setup and planned to keep my head down long enough to get the letter into Ava's hands. Nate met me in the parking lot. He wore his uniform like armor. Mom says you're making threats. I'm making choices. You always were the dramatic one. He put a hand on my chest like he could stop momentum. Don't ruin this. I'm not the one selling it, I said. He stepped aside and let me pass, and I thought for a second that maybe we'd have it out right there between two lines of parked cars. Then his radio crackled, and he chose duty over blood. We're good at that in our family. Inside the event hall, I caught my reflection in a window, a man carrying a letter like a weapon and hoping it knew the difference between a wound and a surgery. I saw Ava across the room with Mom, who looked like ambition had a dress code. Roy hovered near the stage, talking to a florist who looked like she'd rather be cleaning gutters. I took one breath, then another, and moved toward my sister. The envelope felt heavy as history. Mom turned, clocked it, and smiled like a person who has already cut the red wire in your chest. Put that away, she said, or I will tell Ava something she can't unhear. What could that possibly be? I asked. Her smile touched her eyes then, a rare thing on her face. That Tom wasn't your father. I didn't hear whatever string of instructions the coordinator shouted into her headset. I heard the creak of the floorboards, the way sound tilts when shame crawls up your back and perches on your shoulder like a cat. Say that again, I said, careful, like a person handling glass. Mom's lipstick didn't smudge when she smiled. Tom wasn't your father. A lie to terrify a child, I said, except I wasn't a child and terror had a new set of teeth. Try again, Lorna. It's not a lie, she said, voice flat. He knew. He chose you anyway. That was his gift. Mine was keeping us afloat afterward. She flicked her eye toward Roy like she was checking a mirror. So put the envelope away. Be a gentleman. Let your sister have one day that isn't about your crusades. Ava was watching us, face small and pale under the lights. What's happening? Your brother brought a letter from a dead man to ruin your rehearsal, Mom said brightly. Isn't that just like him? Give us a minute, I said to Ava, not looking away from Mom. Please. Ava hesitated, then nodded and drifted toward the staging area. Mom's smile fell off like a mask. Say it all, I told her. Say it so I don't have to keep imagining worse. She took a breath that sounded like relief. You were a mistake. A beautiful one. Tom wasn't ready. Neither was I. Someone else was, Kinder. Later, Tom came back, and we decided to be a family. He never asked questions he didn't want answers to. Who? The word scraped my throat. It doesn't matter. It matters enough for you to use it as a weapon, I said. Name him. She looked over my shoulder. Roy had joined Ava. He was gesturing at the aisle, telling her how to walk, which foot to lead with, how to be carried by a future she hadn't chosen. Don't do this, she said. You'll break her. I'm trying to keep her from binding herself to a lie. I glanced down at the envelope. My hand was sweating through the paper. If you want me to put it away, tell me the truth and tell Roy to step back. She stared like she was trying to force me to be a son I didn't know how to be. After rehearsal. We'll talk after rehearsal. Which meant never. Which meant when the contract was signed and the photos taken and the gossip calcified into something that outlived the actual events. I put the envelope in my jacket. Fine, I said. After rehearsal, I found Ava backstage. She was gripping her bouquet like a lifeline. The florist adjusted a ribbon and stepped away, and only then did I recognize her under a new haircut and the armor of a work smile. Kaylee, my ex. The one who hadn't come to Dad's funeral because she was bad with hospitals. Life is full of side characters who don't know they're still in your story until the lighting hits them wrong. Jack, she said softly, like an apology with my name hanging on it. This town really is one room with 1,000 doors, I said, because I didn't have the bandwidth for old wars. She glanced at Ava, then at my hands. Don't do it here, she said. Whatever it is. Did Roy hire you? She nodded once. Through RLC. I thought it was weird. Thought you knew. Everybody thinks I know things, I said. It's one of my worst features. Ava tugged at my sleeve. Walk with me. She led me down a hallway lined with photographs of the mill when it still made things. I didn't want the text, she said. I wanted you there. But Mom said. Mom says a lot of things. She said you'd make it about Dad. He left you a letter, I said. I've had it for 10 years. He wanted it to find you when you looked happiest. I don't know if this is that. Ava leaned against the wall like her knees were unreliable. I feel like I'm running a race where someone keeps moving the finish line. You always did, I said. We learned to run on gravel. I'm scared, she whispered. I am too. Her eyes flicked to my pocket. What's in the letter? His heart, I said. And a key. I told her about the box, the ledger, the emails. I didn't say the thing Mom had said. I didn't put skin on that wound. Ava swallowed. If you blow this up, it will blow me up too. If I keep it small, it eats you from the inside, I said. She squeezed her eyes shut. Why does being loved feel like being dragged? Because we learn love from a woman who loved outcomes more than people. The coordinator popped her head around the corner. Places. Ava took my hand for 1 second, squeezed like she was memorizing a shape, then let go. After, she said. We'll talk after. Which meant maybe. Which meant if she survived the choreography. I took my seat in the back. Roy walked Ava down the pretend aisle for practice, milking it, the hero of his own movie. Ethan beamed like a man in an ad. Mom dabbed at phantom tears. My phone buzzed against my thigh. An email from compliance. We received your complaint. Please do not share details publicly during active review. I laughed, a short bark that made the woman next to me flinch. In front, Mom turned. Our eyes met. She mouthed, be good. I mouthed back, be honest. And then, because restraint had kept me alive but never clean, I got up, walked to the aisle, and said, Ava, I need 5 minutes. With you and only you. Mom stood. Absolutely not. Ethan stepped between us, palms open, conflict avoidant the way men who never had to fight learn to be. Jack, let's talk outside. We will, I said without looking at him. After I talked to my sister. The room hummed like a beehive. Ava looked at the people she was supposed to please and at me, who had never asked her to be anything but alive. She said, 5 minutes, and the hum turned into a chorus of disapproval. We went to the loading dock where the air was cool and smelled like wet rope. I pulled the envelope. Do you want this now? Ava's chin trembled. Yes. I held it out. Before her fingers could close over it, the door banged open. Mom, Roy, Nate, because of course. And behind them, Ethan, pale and furious. Mom pointed at the envelope like it was a weapon. If you hand that to her, she said, voice steady as a blade, I will tell her who you are. There's a split second when someone raises a blade in a family where everyone decides whether to scream or to watch. We watched. Say it, I told her. Don't keep swinging the threat like a lamp over our heads. Mom looked at Ava, not me. Tom wasn't his father. Ava blinked, slow, like waking from a dream into another one. What? It doesn't change anything, Mom rushed. He's still your brother. He always will be. But he doesn't get to use Tom like a cudgel. The dock held its breath. Roy stared at the river as if it could give him a script. Nate's jaw ticked. Ethan reached for Ava, and she flinched. I took the envelope back, not to hoard it, but to keep it from being torn in half while we ripped each other apart. We can do 2 things at once, I said. We can let this hurt, and we can do the right thing. The right thing, Mom echoed, scorn sharp as lemon. Your right thing always involves you on a cross. Then stop hammering, I said. Roy laughed all throat. Buddy, you think this is about your noble crusade? This is about keeping this family from being smeared in the paper. Then stop giving them ink, I said, and handed the envelope to Ava. She took it like it weighed nothing. She opened it like it might bite. She read in silence, cheeks flush with something that wasn't shame. When she reached the part with the key, her eyes closed. Then she put the letter back and held it to her chest like a heat pack on frostbitten skin. Dad wrote to me, she said, voice soft and not for anyone but herself. Not to Mom's idea of me. To me. She looked up, eyes slick. Why didn't you give this to me sooner? Because I was waiting for you to look happy, I said, and hated how small my voice sounded. She nodded once. Okay. She turned to Mom. You don't get to weaponize his love. Mom's mouth trembled like she'd been struck. Ethan stepped in, eager to return the room to a version he could control. Ava, we need to talk about timing. The rehearsal. She held up a hand. He stopped. Something old and tired fell out of his face. I reached into my jacket and pulled the compliance printouts. Here's the short of it, I said. Roy's company is a pass-through. Money goes from the venue to RLC to shell vendors back to Roy. Ethan's department helps approve those vendors. Mom wrote them to keep our name out of it. We can pretend it's just how things are done, or we can call it what it is. Conspiracy, Nate said, finally choosing a word that fit. Survival, Mom shot back. The world is built by people who can tolerate ambiguity. Your father couldn't. He died poor. He died honest, I said, and he didn't die my father any less. For a half-second, every face showed me a different version of the same truth. Love and fear rarely ride separate horses. Ava exhaled like coming up after a dive. We're not doing the rehearsal, she said. I need to think. She handed the compliance papers back to me, then looked at Ethan. Do you love me? Yes, he said, the words sliding fast. Do you love me enough to stand up to the men who sign your checks? He didn't answer fast enough. We all heard it. Mom grabbed Ava's hand. Sweetheart, listen to me. Ava pulled away. No. For once, listen to me. She looked at Nate. Please take Mom home. She looked at Roy. Stay away from me. From my finances. From my brother. She looked at Ethan, and something in her eyes splintered. If you want to marry me, you stand with me tomorrow. No pass-throughs. No deals. Just us. Ethan, to his credit or damnation, didn't lie. I don't know if I can. Then I don't know if I can either, she said, and we all heard what that meant. We left the dock like survivors of a small war. Nate shepherded Mom away with the same gentle force he used to break up bar fights. Roy wandered toward the parking lot, already taking out his phone to make calls that would try to stitch his story back together. Ethan sat down on a milk crate and put his head in his hands. Ava and I sat with our feet hanging above the river. The letter lay between us. When did you find out? She asked. Today, I said. The truth tasted clean and strange. I found the box Dad left. There's more. Ledger. Emails. She smiled, a small broken thing. Of course there's a ledger. We sat a long time. The water moved like a sheet being shaken. Somewhere inside the building, a song started for a rehearsal that no longer had actors. Finally, Ava said, if you pull the plug on the vendors, Mom will call you a monster. She already has, I said. If you don't, you'll call yourself a coward. I already have. She nodded. Okay, she said and stood. Let's build a different day. That night, the florist texted me, which is to say Kaylee, who still had my number saved as if the past might call back. If the contracts go sideways, she wrote, I can do backyard, simple, tasteful cash. No RLC. I stared at the text until the screen dimmed. Then I forwarded the compliance files to a reporter I trusted from the time my crew found asbestos in a school and no one wanted to admit it. I wrote, off record until noon tomorrow. Then do what you do. At midnight, an email from compliance landed. We are initiating an immediate review. The word immediate glowed. For the first time in days, I slept. In the morning, I woke to three things. A missed call from Roy at 2:07 a.m. A text from Nate that said brace, and a voicemail from Mom. Cool, dangerous, expert. You wanted to be a martyr, she said. Congratulations. Check the news. Mom's voicemail was a satin blade. You wanted to be a martyr. Congratulations. Check the news. The headline hit like a doorframe I didn't see. Local contractor accused of extortion amid wedding dispute. A grainy photo of me loading lumber, eyes narrowed, looked like a mugshot for a crime I hadn't committed yet. Anonymous sources said I'd threatened vendors. A quote from a family member called me volatile. The story used the word estranged like a stamp placed on animals before auction. I called the reporter I trusted. Noon, she said. I'm running your documents at noon. Until then, do nothing that can be spun. Breathing can be spun, I said. Then breathe boring, she said, and hung up. I drove to Kaylee's shop. She was arranging ranunculus like apologies. You saw it, she said. I'm in print, I said. Mom must be proud. Kaylee's mouth twisted. I've done weddings for influencers and city council wives. None of them were this loud. She slid a notebook across the counter. Plan B, backyard. Cash. No RLC. I called in favors. Why? She shrugged. Because I remember your dad building a swing for my grandma for free after the storm. Because Ava brought me soup when I had the flu. Because you're not the villain I painted you as when we broke. I looked at the list. Folding chairs, string lights, a borrowed sound system, mason jars that used to hold pickles and now would hold hope. Can we pull it off? If she wants it, Kaylee said. If she wants it for herself, not for a photograph. Ava texted. I think we should postpone. I typed back. Or we build a different day. One we can live with. Then I hovered, deleted, rewrote. Your call. I'll follow. 10 minutes later. If I say yes, you can't fight anyone at the cake table. I'll only fight cupcakes, I wrote. They always started. At 11:07 a.m. process server found me outside the shop and handed me an envelope like he was passing a hot coal. Temporary restraining order. I was barred from contacting listed vendors or appearing at the mill. Roy's name was everywhere in the filings. RLC events, the address of a storage unit, a signature written like a man pressing too hard. Good. I told Kaylee, and she blinked. If I'm barred from the mill, we won't be tempted to keep feeding their contracts. Backyard or nothing. At 11:59, my phone buzzed so hard it crawled toward the edge of the counter. The reporter's piece went live at noon like a grenade with a clock. Exclusive. City contract pass-through funnels wedding funds through shell vendors. Emails. Ledgers. The line where Mom wrote, please keep our family out of publicity. Compliance announced a review. The city suspended RLC pending investigation. Roy called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was whiskey and nails. You think you can do this to me? I made your life possible. You ungrateful. The rest was an anatomy lesson in the human throat under pressure. Nate called as I was loading Kaylee's van. Sirens whined behind him. He's moving, Nate said. Roy. Storage unit on Riverside. He's there with boxes. If he burns them, half the case turns to smoke. I'll call the reporter. The DA. Nobody moves fast till there's a picture, Nate said. And Roy knows it. Ava texted then. Backyard. Aunt June's. 6 p.m. tomorrow. If you can build it. I looked at the clock like it owed me an apology. We can build it. I wrote, and meant both the pergola and whatever came after. Don't go alone, Nate said. I'm en route. I went anyway. The storage facility was a grid of metal mouths. Unit 84 was open. Roy stood inside with a lighter and a banker's box like a priest considering sacrifice. Mom was there too, hair uncombed, her power drained. She looked smaller without an audience. Roy smiled when he saw me. Buddy, come help your old man tidy up. Put the lighter down, I said. Or what? You'll call the paper? I am the paper right now. He shook the lighter, flame flaring, a cheap sun. You think you can erase the line between us with a headline? Between us, I said. He laughed. You really don't know. Roy, Mom said, warning in her voice. Stop. He reached into the box, pulled out a photocopy of a hospital form. A corner was torn off. He waved a matching corner like a magician's reveal. Paternity isn't ink. It's leverage. He pressed the two pieces together. The name line read Father, Roy L. Carter. My mouth went dry. The room tilted. Tom wasn't a weak man, Roy said. He was sentimental. He decided to raise you anyway. I decided to make sure Lorna remembered who she owed. Put the lighter down, I said again, and this time the words scraped. Nate's cruiser turned the corner, lights washing the metal doors red-blue-red. Police, he shouted, voice booming bigger than his body. Hands where I can see them. Mom stepped between us like she could sponge up 20 years of bad choices. Please, she whispered. Stop making boys pay for men's pride. Roy dropped the lighter. For a second I thought it was surrender. Then he kicked the box toward me and grabbed another. Flame licked paper. Nate lunged. So did I? The three of us stumbled, a choreography of old grudges. I stamped the fire, coughing, eyes burning. Nate had Roy by the wrist, cuff clicking like punctuation. Obstruction and attempted destruction of evidence, Nate said, breathless. Say another word, and I'll find you a few more. Roy smiled at me over his shoulder as Nate walked him to the cruiser. You're mine whether you like it or not, he said quietly. You carry my jaw when you clench. You carry my temper when you preach. I looked at my hands, ash on the knuckles, and chose what to keep. Mom sagged onto a crate. He was supposed to be decoration, she said dully. A man to get us through a bad season. Then the season never ended. Tom knew. I asked, because the hole needed a bottom. She nodded, eyes wet. He chose you anyway. He asked me to choose better. I tried to choose survival. We sat in the corridor that smelled like dust, and the last time. The sirens faded. I took pictures of every page that still had words. When I stood, my legs were steady. Tomorrow, I said, we build something honest. Are you inviting me? She asked, voice small. Come as a mother, I said. Not as a strategist. She nodded like maybe she knew the difference, and maybe she didn't. Morning came with a headline that finally told the truth without asking permission. City suspends RLC. Council schedules emergency session. My inbox was a rainstorm. The reporter wanted more. Compliance wanted chain of custody. Half the town wanted to know if we were still doing a wedding. The other half wanted to watch us fail. Ava texted, backyard build starts at 9. Bring coffee. Bring your spine. Aunt June's porch was a memory with splinters. Neighbors showed up the way they do when weather gets dramatic, carrying folding tables, crock pots, extension cords that had lived entire lives in basements. Kaylee ran the yard like an orchestra, hair up, pencil behind her ear, the mouth I knew from other lives set in a line that meant business. Arch goes here, she said, marking gravel with chalk. Lights strung from gutter to oak. We'll hide the trash cans with quilts. We're making vows in a place that knows ours. Mom came at 10, no makeup, a scarf around the part of her throat that told on her when she was tired. She stood at the gate, unsure of her lines. I walked to her. Sit, I said, pointing to the porch. Help if you want. Watch if you can't. No speeches. She swallowed. Okay. She set a tin of cookies on the rail like tribute. At 11, I drove to City Hall. Ethan had texted, Council at noon. I'm testifying. It wasn't an apology. It was a weather report. The chamber smelled like old carpet and careers. Ethan's boss sat like a man trying not to sweat. Roy's seat was empty. Nate stood near the door, eyes flicking between me and the dais like he was tracking wind. Ethan spoke without his tie. I participated in approving vendors that lacked proper due diligence, he said. RLC was a pass-through. I knew. I minimized the risk because I wanted my project to move. He looked at the council, then at the press, and finally at me. I'm resigning. Before or after they fire you? A councilman asked, bored and cruel. Before, Ethan said, and for the first time since I met him, he sounded like a man whose voice belonged to him. Outside, he found me on the steps. I love her, he said without greeting. That's not enough if I can't stand up in a room like that. It's a start, I said. But starts that don't move become monuments to good intentions. He nodded, face chalky. Is she? She's building a different day? Am I invited? He asked, and the boy in him asked, not the man. Not today, I said. Show me 6 months of spine, and we'll talk. Back at the house, the yard looked like a magazine spread designed by a committee of people who had seen too much real life to care about symmetry. Kaylee had turned mason jars into lanterns. Aunt June had found Dad's old hammer and hung it on a nail by the gate like a blessing. Ava came down the steps in a simple dress that looked like her childhood had been translated into fabric. She saw the hammer and touched it with 2 fingers like a superstition. You ready? I asked. She nodded, then shook her head, then laughed through it. Ask me again in 5 minutes. I checked my phone out of a reflex that felt like a bad habit. A text from an unknown number. On my way. Don't start without me. I didn't show it to anyone. I didn't need to. I knew the shape of Roy's chaos. Mom drifted over, hands twisted around each other like rope. I want to apologize, she said, in a way that isn't just strategy. You can do that, I said. Later, when apology isn't a tactic. She nodded, sat back down. The skin under her eyes looked like paper left in the rain. At 5, I stood at the gate and watched people fill the yard. Neighbors who remembered the flood, men Dad had taught to hang drywall, women Mom had impressed, and then disappointed, and who came anyway because they preferred messy loyalty to polished treason. Ethan arrived and stayed on the sidewalk like a student who'd come to see a class he used to take. He had a box in his hands. Inside was a framed photo of Dad teaching Ava to ride a bike, both of them laughing so hard it blurred. He handed it to me. For the altar, he said. If that's what this is. It'll do, I said, and set it by the hammer. At 5:42, the unknown number texted again from a different phone. Open the gate. Nate read over my shoulder and swore. He's not coming in, he said. Not today. At 5:55, we lined up. The track team from the high school played a song on kazoos because the guitarist canceled under pressure. It was perfect. I offered Ava my arm. Are we really doing this? She whispered. We've survived worse, I said. We can survive happiness. The gate creaked. Voices rose. Roy stood there in a suit that didn't fit, hair combed like it meant an apology. Two men I recognized from his crew flanked him like bookends. Absolutely not, Nate said, stepping forward. I'm family, Roy said, loud enough for the neighbors. Then act like it, Ava said, voice clear. Leave. He smiled for the crowd and stepped inside anyway. The thing about small-town drama is that it treats boundaries like suggestions. Roy walked down the side of the yard as if he were inspecting a foundation he intended to rip out later. Conversations paused and then resumed in a higher pitch. Get him out, Kaylee hissed, appearing at my elbow with a bouquet like a club. I've got it, Nate said, but he looked at me first because blood complicates jurisdiction. I met Roy at the pergola we'd built in 4 frantic hours. He touched the wood and smirked. Nice work. You always were good with scraps. You aren't staying, I said. He glanced at the hammer hanging from the nail. Still worshipping ghosts. We're honoring the guy who taught us not to steal, I said. You could try it. He leaned in. Say the word, and I'll leave. But you say that word in front of everyone. You tell them you're not my son. Silence grew around us like vines. Ava stepped between us, dress gathering dust at the hem. We're not doing this. Sweetheart, Roy said, softening his mouth into a shape he probably practiced in bathroom mirrors. I only came to wish you happiness. Then give me the gift of distance, she said. He turned to the crowd, palms out. I tried, he announced. But this family loves their martyrs. Mom stood, voice shaking. Roy, please. He faced her. You kept my name off the birth certificate, and for what? To end up here with mason jars and a kazoo band? Laughter rippled meanly at the edges of the yard. People love a script. Roy was writing his. I took the hammer off the nail, not as a threat, but as a memory. He taught me to hold this steady, I said, loud enough for the first 2 rows. To hit once instead of 10 times angry. To measure twice so you don't cut a finger to save a board. Roy rolled his eyes. Tom taught you to be poor. He taught me to stop when a man is under the nail, I said, voice quiet. You never learned where to stop. Nate stepped closer, hand light on Roy's elbow. Let's go. Roy jerked away. Touch me, and I'll tell them. All of it. Tell them, I said. Tell them you're the one who taught a woman to mistake leverage for love. He smiled, mean and bright. I'm his father, he said, pointing at me, projecting like the mayor he'll never be. I'm the one she chose when she didn't want your saint to know. Gasps travel fast in small spaces. Someone dropped a fork. Kaylee didn't blink. She'd done mascara in worse rooms. I looked at Ava, then at Mom. She was crying without moving her face, the way women who've had to keep their makeup on learn to grieve. Okay, I said, and my voice surprised even me with how calm it was. I lifted the hammer and hung it back on the nail. The man who fixed my brakes in the winter with his fingers numb was my father. The man who taught me to look a person in the eyes and tell the truth even if it broke the room was my father. Biology writes checks. Fatherhood cashes them. Roy opened his mouth, but the crowd had shifted. They weren't with him anymore. They were with the nailed-together arch and the girl in the simple dress and the brother who had found a way to say the thing without setting the whole place on fire. Leave, Ava said again. Not a plea this time, a sentence. Roy's jaw clenched in the mirror of mine. He looked to Mom. She didn't move. He looked to Nate. Nate did. He walked Roy to the gate with the kind of gentleness that isn't negotiable. The crew guys hesitated, then followed like men who had misread the wind. Kaylee exhaled a breath she'd been holding for 3 years. Proceed, she whispered. Ava took my arm. The kazoo band tried again. It was even better the second time because no one was pretending it was anything other than what it was, a silly sound made by people who chose joy after a storm. We walked. The yard blurred. We reached the arch. She faced the people, and then just me. No officiant, she said. No license. Just a promise to myself. And I want you to witness it. Always, I said, and the word felt like it unlocked a door in my ribs. She spoke simple vows, the kind you can keep on a Tuesday when you've slept badly and the sink is full. She promised to choose work that didn't ask her to shrink. She promised to stop calling sacrifice love when it was just fear in a dress. She promised to stop letting men tell her what grief required. When she finished, the yard was quiet in the holy way that doesn't need a church. Kaylee handed her a bouquet that smelled like honeysuckle and resolve. Mom, from the steps, clapped once and then again, hesitant, then sure. The yard followed, sound rising like a warm front. Ethan lingered at the gate, eyes wet. He didn't step inside. Not yet. He put a hand to his heart, like he was pledging a future to whatever spine he could grow. As the light thinned, the reporter texted, DA drafting charges. RLC. Procurement. Might be fast. I put my phone face down and watched my sister choose herself without waiting for a man to give her permission. After the crowd thinned and the backyard looked like the morning after a storm you survived, plates stacked, chairs crooked, a child asleep under the quilt Mom had brought, I stood at the porch rail and let the day settle into the joints. Nate leaned next to me. DA filed, he said softly. Roy, procurement chief, 2 council aides. Mom will get called. Might be a witness. Might be a target. It depends on how quick she wants to tell the truth. She's tired of performing, I said. Maybe that's the best chance we have. Kaylee came up with a trash bag on one arm and a grin that looked like the first warm day in March. We did it, she said. You did it, I said. I hammered. You conjured. She bumped my shoulder. Don't get poetic on me, Carpenter. Then, quieter, don't disappear again. Even if we're not whatever we were, don't disappear. I won't, I said, and meant it like a vow said under a homemade arch. Ava found me with the letter in her hand, folded and soft at the edges like something cherished. I want to keep the key, she said. Not to open boxes. To remember doors exist. It's yours, I said. She nodded toward the street. Ethan stood by his car, watching, not fishing for a scene. I told him to call me in 6 months, she said. If he's the person he says he wants to be. That's generous, I said. It's strategic, she said, and we both laughed at the word in her mouth. Mom's word. Maybe we can repurpose it. Mom came to us then, hands empty. She looked like a woman who had stayed up all night telling herself the truth and was surprised to still be breathing. I called the DA, she said without preamble. I told them what I did, what I asked them to hide. I told them I'd testify. She swallowed. I wanted so badly to outrun hunger that I taught my children to eat themselves. Ava stepped forward. You can stay for cake, she said. That's all I have for now. Mom nodded, relief and grief wrestling. Cake is more than I deserve. We ate store-bought cake off paper plates, and it tasted like victory you don't brag about. The kazoo band played a lullaby for a toddler who refused to sleep. Someone's uncle fixed the gutter with his pocket knife because old habits die kind. Roy's crew didn't come back. The sky went the clean blue of a slate wiped. When the last guest left, I walked to the gate and took Dad's hammer down. I pressed my thumb against the nicks in the handle, each one a memory of a screw that slipped, a day that got away, a board that finally fit. You okay? Ava asked. I was uninvited to your wedding, I said. We built a day no one could cancel. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Who's your father? She asked, not a test, just a wonder. The man who wrote to you about happiness, I said. The man who taught me that carrying tools is love. The one who didn't need his name on a form to claim me. She nodded. Me too. Later, in my kitchen, I spread the ledger pages like a map and emailed clean copies to the DA, the reporter, compliance, and, because I'd learned something about witness and governance, to myself. Then I wrote a note in my own block letters and taped it inside the cigar box where I keep the things that decide me. For Ava's next big day. For the porch swings we owe our neighbors. For Mom when she forgets and tries to conduct the weather. For me when I mistake pain for purpose. I slid the box back on the shelf and turned off the light. The house didn't feel empty. It felt held. People will say I wrecked a wedding. They won't be wrong. But they'll miss the part where we stopped mistaking a performance for a promise. They'll miss the part where we chose to be a family without a stage manager. The next morning, a text from Nate. Arraignment at 9. A text from the reporter. A single thumbs up emoji. Because sometimes you don't need more than that. A text from Kaylee. Leftover flowers on your porch. Don't let them die because you're allergic to maintenance. I smiled at a quiet kitchen and boiled water for the cheapest coffee that still tastes like morning. I thought about the boy I'd been, the one who believed love was earned with sacrifice. I poured 2 mugs, carried one to the porch, and set it next to the other chair. Sorry, this table's for family only. I whispered into the air, and for once the word family didn't feel like a test I had to pass. It felt like a thing we built with our hands and kept with them.